Hey guys, welcome to Module 6 in the 7-Day Startup course. So in this module, we're going to be talking about setting targets and looking at the various stages of your business and what's one metric that's going to be something that you might want to consider tracking at that stage. So this is what's referred to as the one metric that matters. This isn't an idea I came up with, but it's a really useful way to think about analytics because I think a lot of people get really carried away with a whole bunch of different metrics. And a lot of the time, startups, especially self-funded startups like 7-Day startups, they don't have enough data to actually draw conclusions from analytics. So it's a really big distraction to get too carried away with analytics. And it's definitely something I've done before and it's something that I want you to avoid. So what I advocate is coming up with one metric that you're always keeping an eye on and then always revisiting to make sure that that's the right metric for you to focus on. So that's called the one metric that matters, or OMTM if you have a government history like me and you're obsessed with acronyms. So make it a financial metric, not a vanity metric. Vanity metrics are things that make you feel good, like the amount of likes you have on Facebook, but they don't actually have a decent impact on your business. So make it a financial metric, not a vanity metric. I like to think about who's signing up. So if you get a bunch of customers signing up, that's cool. But if they're your mates signing up, I wouldn't draw the same conclusions from that as you would if it was someone that hasn't heard of you before. As soon as you get people that haven't heard of you before signing up, that's a really good sign that you're onto something because the way you've executed what you're doing, or the idea or some part of what you're doing, is enough to convince someone who doesn't know you. Maybe they've heard about you from someone you do know, but maybe they've just visited your site and you've convinced them right there to become a customer. So that's a huge milestone worth celebrating, and signing up your mates is cool too. But there's a very big difference between the two. So don't get too distracted if you get a few of your friends becoming customers. I would save the celebrations for when you have people you don't know becoming customers. So set a month one goal. When you launch, say how many customers you want after 1 month. When I launched WP Curve, my goal was to get 10 customers after 1 month and then to grow at 10% per month. What actually happened was I got 10% monthly growth consistently, but I got 10 customers in the first week and about 10 customers a week for the next 2 years. So we grew a lot faster than I thought, but I set a pretty modest goal that I thought was realistic and that I could go after, and at least had a deadline where I thought at the end of the month, if I haven't signed up 10 customers, then maybe I'm going to do something else. And whether it's the idea or the way I've executed or something else, doesn't really matter. But if I've given it a month and I think I've given it everything and I haven't got 10 signups, I thought with my audience, that's probably about right. And I ended up getting a lot more than I hoped for. So I'd encourage you to set a realistic goal, give yourself a month after your launch and see how many customers you've got. So I like to use a live tracking spreadsheet. I've got a sample of this, a Google Doc that I use for WP Curve. I actually used it before I launched WP Curve, and we still use it to this day, 2 years on. We manually update the monthly recurring revenue and the run rate, and manually update the expected expenses, and we still do that even though we've got a whole bunch of systems for managing this stuff, because I just like the idea of being able to put something in a spreadsheet and seeing visually, like with your line chart, how you're growing, what your expenses are. And I still enjoy going in and updating it. So you can use this template. You can get it from 7daystartup.co from the resources section, and you can put some estimates in there for yourself. I'll show you that at the end of this module, but that's a really useful way for you to just start thinking about how many customers you want to be signing up and what your business looks like at the various stages of customers. So constantly revisit your OMTM. So when you start, the monthly growth might be something you choose, and I'll go into some examples soon of ones that you might choose, but 2 years down the track, that might not be the best metric for you to be focusing on to grow your business or to keep your business stable and keep your customers happy, that kind of thing. So it's going to change per stage. It'll change drastically when you've got a new business, you're not even sure if it's a good idea yet. That's going to be a totally different metric to when you've got an established business. So constantly revisit what metric you're tracking and make sure it's still relevant for the stage of business you're in. So here are a few examples that I've come across from other companies or I've used myself from different metrics you might consider looking at for your OMTM at different stages of business. So problem idea validation. There's one method from Sean Ellis who prescribes emailing your customers and asking them how disappointed would they be if you close the service. Now it's a pretty aggressive email to send. And he says if you get over 40% of very disappointed or disappointed, then you're probably onto a good thing. There's a bit of interesting content out there on startups that have done this. Heat and Shaw's put out a bit of content about this. I'm not totally convinced that having a metric like that really tells you that much at all, because people's behavior and what they say are always two different things. But it might be something you want to consider if you're really not sure. I think the better way to do it is obviously to launch and just to look at the traction. If you're getting traction, it's working well. If you're not getting traction, then it's not working well. So minimum viable product, at the end of this week, you will put out a service or a product for an audience, and you want to look at how many people are paying you. That's really the metric that matters. How many people are paying you at any given time, and how much that's growing each month. Because I want you to build a business that grows, not just one that stays the same. So monthly recurring revenue growth has been the metric that we used for the first 2 years to figure out whether or not we were on track. And very early on, and continued until now, we probably don't measure that quite as much. But for the first couple of years, when we're still growing, we wanted to know if people really resonated with the idea. Then monthly recurring revenue growth was a good one to use. So business model validation is about, okay, you might have a good idea, but what is your business model? Like fixing WordPress websites is a good idea, but how you actually implement that? Do you do one-off jobs? Do you do recurring jobs? Do you do projects? Do you sell info products on how to fix WordPress websites? There's a whole bunch of different ways. Do you have a membership? There's a whole bunch of different ways to solve that problem and to execute that idea. So your business model also needs to be validated. And a good way of doing that, I think, is to look at the profit without the founders. And I've talked about that before in previous modules. And our spreadsheet gives you an idea of how to do that. Total up all of the costs you're going to have with a reasonable number of customers. Assume the founders aren't there and you have to pay a wage to replace them. And then look at your profit margin. And if it's not over 50% at a small scale, as you grow, it might be less than 50%. I think multi-million-dollar businesses would rarely have a margin that high. But when you're starting out, I think that's a good benchmark to go for. What's the theoretical profit without the founders? And if it's a good margin, then the business model is probably sound. So month-on-month growth is at the growth stage. This is what you want to be measuring. Really high growth startups will measure week-on-week growth. I mean, insanely growing startups will measure day-on-day growth. But for the average 7-day startup, this is the metric in the community that we generally measure. Like if you're growing by 10% a month, that to me is a really good solid growth, and it'll be easy early, a bit harder later on. But if you can keep growing at that percentage, you're going to grow a very decent business. And I'll go into that a little bit more in the slides ahead. So stability is when your business is solid, you've got a big team, you've got a big bunch of customers, and everything's going well. You might not be growing quite as aggressively as you were early on, but what are the things that matter for you to measure at that stage? And an example of that might be customer happiness. So like if you want to measure a net promoter score or something, reviews on your jobs or something to give you an idea of how good your service is, how likely people are to recommend you, then that might be the best indicator of how well your business is going to go in the future. It might be a better indicator than month-on-month growth. And there might be other indicators as well at the stability stage. So just keep in mind that these will change, and you need to choose something that represents a measure of how well your business is doing at that stage. So the power of monthly growth, I've mentioned goals of 10% monthly growth, which is what I had in my mind when I was starting the business. I want to illustrate this with an example because I think a lot of people don't understand the power of percentage monthly growth. So in this example, maybe not a realistic example, but it gives you an idea of how powerful the growth can be. So if you have a $6,000 a month business growing at 15% per month, after 2 years, that's a $2 million annual business. So this is already a multi-million-dollar business after just 2 years if you can sustain 15% per month from a starting point of $6,000 a month. So that's pretty crazy. But what's even crazy is after 3 years, it's a $10 million business. Now, obviously, it's very hard to grow from a $2 million to a $10 million business in just 1 year, and it would be rare for that sort of thing to happen. But this gives you an idea of the power of monthly growth. Like if you can grow every month by a certain percentage, then this ends up adding up very, very quickly. And we've seen that from WP Curve going from 0 to 70K a month in about 2 years. And just by growing at a certain percent each month. I think there's only 1 month that time, 1 or 2 months in the first 18 months that we didn't grow by more than 5%, and somewhere we grew by 20, 30%. So it averaged out 10 to 15%, and that kind of percentage creates a very decent business after not much time at all. So this is a screenshot of the live metrics spreadsheet. These are just made up numbers in here, but what it allows you to do is estimate your monthly recurring revenue, estimate the annual run rate, estimate your costs and how many customers you will have at every stage. And I track them. So the black is how many I actually had. So again, not real data, but for WP Curve, the one we have, the black is how many customers we actually have, what percentage we grew by that month, and the grey is a forecast. So it's like, okay, if you keep growing by 10% a month, 1 year from now, what size will the business be? And for me, I found this really motivating to look at that and think, okay, well, we're at $5,000 monthly recurring revenue now. I remember being at $5,000 monthly recurring revenue and being really excited because I could extrapolate that out with this spreadsheet very easily and see that we were going to be $1 million business in 18 months if we kept up this growth. So that was really motivating for me. And I mean, you're never going to match the forecast exactly. That would just never happen. But it gives you a really neat little tool to use to estimate what the business looks like at various stages and to motivate you a little bit as well. So you can use that, 7daystartup.co. In the resources section, you can grab a copy of that, make your own copy, put your own numbers in there and see how your business looks under growth. So that's it for this module. I hope that's been useful. I'll see you in the next module, which is the final module, which is about launching and how to run a business after you launch it.